Good afternoon and welcome to and the Pulpit here on your hometown station, KHGS AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. This is your holy host, the Bishop of Santa Clarita, back about that nobody wants to talk about in public, religion and politics, and yes, they do indeed do mix. I want to get to the air right before we introduce our first guest today. I encourage you to go to our Rumble channel, to Politics in the We have all of our shows uploaded after the show is done, and then we take out all the commercials. You can like that, share that, if you would, Rumble. And then for those of you that are getting in the, or will be getting into the July the 4th Independence Day spirit, 150 years next month. Freedom's Way Baptist Church is going to be for 28th at 5, our Stars and Stripes concert with the Santa Clarita Valley Concert Band. Love to have you come. It's an indoor event. Enjoy an evening of patriotic music and some refreshments to and of the Santa Clarita Concert Band. If you a little more of them and you want it a little sooner, on May 10th at 7 p.m. at the CHS Performing Arts Center right here in Santa Clarita. The Romantic Symphony this Saturday, May 10th, 7 p.m. at Arts Center right here right off of Nadal Street. So I encourage you to go there. Then coming Friday at 10 a.m., we have a broadcast here at KHGS that yours truly is going to be doing with guest and Republican. Yes, you're going to hear my wonderful voice against his English brogue. It's going to sound so good. Digitally live on KHTS podcast at 10 a.m. with Steve Hilton. Encourage you to both watch us live and listen to us live. Our guest today is no stranger. A couple of times before. He is Burbank City Council Member Konstantine Anthony. Konstantine has been a member of the City Council since December. He is also the first self-identified, if I'm not mistaken, he'll correct me if I'm wrong there. And then some of you might remember that Konstantine made national headlines he was paddled by a drag queen at a local Democrat event here in Santa Clarita. At the time, Konstantine made time, and he has graciously done again to Councilmember Anthony. Welcome to Politics in the Pulpit.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Konstantine, you won re-election in the council last year. Tell us a little bit about that run.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I will say back in 2020 when I won my first, was the first openly autistic elected official, Mississippi. And then during that time, much like Santa Clarita, mayorship in Burbank. And so in 2023, I was appointed by my fellow council members to serve as mayor for a year. And I had just about 3 months prior gotten my official diagnosis, which is interesting as an adult to go through the whole medical doctors and all this stuff to maybe prove a little. So to get the letter, if it's certified, if it's on paper, people tend to take it a little bit more seriously. Not that we have to, but to it. I became the first diagnosed autistic mayor in the country. And in 2024, my first time running, broke the record for votes in city council history. The election, I broke that record again. And what was interesting to me about that time, a lot of the work we were doing on the city council was really pushing for working class changes, putting money back in the pockets of working class Americans. So huge push to get me out of that seat. A bunch of corporate interests, real estate, spent about $750,000 against me in that race, which is kind of insane if you think about it. Seat in Burbank, but we ended up winning. We knocked doors. We talked to people. They appreciated my freedom to live their life and pursue their dreams and not strip them of turn.
I understand
I
understand also, Konstantine, that you were an actor.
Oh yes. Got into politics. I guess we never really covered the last time I was on your show. For about 25 years before I I worked in the industry. I was film, television, commercial stuff, live theater, stand-up, improv. It was an interesting experience for me. And so actually when I came down here, and many of your listeners might know this, Burbank is very much like a media.
Sure.
And so I would knock doors, and I'd actually be talking to folks who were in the film industry. And so a lot of the stuff we're doing now, for a lot of those film tax credits to come back to Southern California. I know there's a lot of production happening in Santa Clarita as well. If you want to get your state reps to push for that tax credit, give them a call. Tell them, bring that.
Let's talk about that for a second, Konstantine, because obviously, as you live there in Burbank and live in and represent an area, a part of Hollywood, so too us here in. We've got a lot of studios up here that are just recently built, but I happen to have friends that say a lot of our sound stages are empty, not being used, and it's mainly because a lot of to go elsewhere, like Georgia, New York, New Jersey, and other places that offer, higher tax incentives for them. In California, that we have a Democratic governor and a lot of Democrats, frankly. What can we do to make California ours? We're the home of Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, I would say it's not even a the other day, the president came out and said he wanted to put some tariffs on film production coming from overseas. I think both sides of the aisle are very interested in getting this care of, because yes, it's partially weird fight. It's like which state can offer more for how much, and so I'll take Georgia for instance. They did a really big tax incentive a few years back, and so a bunch of people moved out there and started making production and sound. And they ran out there was like, wait, how come the movies aren't coming back anymore? Because all the to LA, and then New York put up their tax credit. But it went to New, and it's like the studios will just jump around and go wherever the money is. And so, how do we, as I was talking about film and television, this goes back to even like automaking and manufacturing and all of that, building computer chips. How do we create incentives for an industry to remain long-term? The last thing you want to do is create a thing, get people settled, and then suddenly whatever big shift happens devastates that economy and they move out. You're going to move them somewhere else, or just, hollow out a city like Detroit. So what I'm hoping is that a lot of people see movies and celebrities as sort of like something they can listen to and in all bite-sized informational pieces. And so if we can create a system where that it becomes cost-effective, people can make money at it, not just working-class folks can actually make a living. If you can do all of that with the streamlining the process and making it easier to film and all of that work, I'm hoping that gets replicated because all the time, Silicon Valley, even just up north, used to be this hub of like, hey, this is where we're making all the new move to Korea and overseas into Europe. And so it's like, how do we build those industries and make them that both sides of the aisle, everyone jumps in, we put our heads together, and we figure.
Absolutely. We're just tuning in where this is Politics in the Pulpit. Burbank City Council Member Konstantine Anthony. A lot of folks decry our show and say, you guys are so partisan over there from the opposite side of the aisle. And so let me ask you to put on your nonpartisan hat and just kind of think through this. Why do you think the Democrats lost so last November? What are your thoughts as to what the party can do to kind of get back in touch with working class voters?
I think that's an excellent question. And just for folks who haven't heard me on your show before, pretty far left. I'm about as far left as it can go.
You are.
But I'm also a realist, and I understand that most are not far left or far right. They're somewhere in the middle. They're trying to just get by. And so for me, I think the messaging of the presidential race was missing exactly what you're asking about, that working class component. Much from our presidential candidate to say, hey, we're going to put money back in your pocket. You got to Kamala Harris's website and you read through the policy and you're somebody who's into politics, you understand all that. See, it was written in a way to increase home ownership, to increase minimum wage, to really bring back. All of that was there, and it had concrete plans and all of the things necessary to get it done. But that's not what you heard on the rallies. That's not what you heard on the campaign trail. Nobody ever talked about it. It's like I point out, pretty progressive. We lean blue. And in that race in 2024, I was out to folks, there were only 51,000 ballots sent in. 51,000 voted. 4 years prior, we had 1,000 voters. So in a pretty progressive-leaning city, you had a decrease of 8,000 votes. Like, people just didn't even turn in their ballot. One specific example that if you run on the right messaging, you will turn people out. In 2020, 17 votes. 4 years later, with 8,000 less people, I got over 18,000 votes. More votes with less people, and every single person I talk to credits me with not running on social issues, which is news headlines and all the shares on social media, and they're important. Don't get me wrong. You have to make sure you're taking care of people. I ran on economic issues. People vote with their wallet. At the end of the day, all things being equal, people will vote. Trump just had a better message on that economic end, and that's all he pushed. And so I encourage not just Democrats or Republicans, anybody, if you have policies that you think are good for the American people and it makes economic sense, run on that. People want to hear that. They want to know what's going on with their workplace, what's going on with their retirement. Like, those are real important.
You know, I've lived in this state all my life, Constantine. I'll be 49 years old a week from this Friday. You can go ahead and say happy birthday to me right now. But I'll be 49. My wife and I, have owned, this is our second home now, and we have no plans to move out of the state. You know, our church is here in California. But the fact of the matter is, California is a sustainable place for a family like make an economical amount of money. So let me ask you, from a Democratic perspective, and just be honest with us here on Politics of the Pulpit, for most Americans.
No, it's not. It is not. I'll be the first and the last person to tell you. Home price, wages haven't even kept up. The kinds of costs that we are seeing with just we don't have great mass transit. Everyone is forced to drive. So you got to pay for the gas. You got to buy a car. All the distance and the parking, and now you got to build that into the cost of the job, and all of the housing is. We have a very, most people in big cities would disagree, but most of California is very spread out. We have what's called suburb after suburb after suburb, and that's just not an economic way to build a severe housing shortage. More people want to live in California that can live here, and you've seen it. It's gotten so expensive. We're losing congressional election is leaving,
and they're leaving. And they're leaving to states where there are more deer elk people.
Yeah,
like
exactly
Wyoming,
right.
like Wyoming, Montana, Nevada, of course, which is just our neighboring. But yeah, and of course, I want to make California great again, and maybe my Democratic friend Konstantine Anthony for another 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely, and I do have an issue I want to get to if we have time.
I think we can do that. And if you just in the pulpit here on your hometown station, and our guest today is Konstantine Anthony. He is the Burbank City Council member, of course, and ran for, if I'm not mistaken, you ran for
County supervisor.
County supervisor a couple years ago. So we'll talk about that when we come back on the other side of the pulpit. All right, we're back here live at the bottom of the hour. Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station, KHTS AM 1220 and 8.1. Our guest today is Konstantine Anthony, Burbank City Council member, was mayor for 1 year and supervisor. Talk to us a little bit about that. In fact, the last time you were on with me, you had a little bit of some news, and you were also running for supervisor and came in third. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena, Santa Clarita, Antelope Valley, all in the same LA County supervisorial district. And I ran on a message of really creating housing. That was really my number one policy. County help with keeping people housed. Homelessness, as you know, is a huge issue, and I the county level. A lot of people want to point fingers at Mayor Bass or Governor Newsom, and I went through all of our failure of homelessness was directly in the county seat. That's the department that does health. That's the department that works with the old from LA City, which I'm actually proud that they did that. That's one of the messages I was pushing for during the race. But I'm happy to say that a lot of the things I campaigned on have been taken up by the Board of Supervisors. Number one, campaigned on doing defensible fire space and brush clearance. The county ended up adopting that a couple months I lost the race. And so, it's not always about winning. It's about getting that message out there. And as you can see, with Altadena, with Pacific Palace, these are the kinds of things that should have been implemented a long time ago, but I'm glad we're moving forward with that. So sometimes it's just get the issue out there, run on it, and be done.
Yeah, well, maybe second time's a charm, Konstantine, so who knows what happens. Let me just make this plain for our listeners. Obviously, conservative Republican and Council Member Konstantine Anthony is a progressive Democrat. And I ask you this question, not from a partisan perspective on my end, but just as a keen observer. I mentioned earlier, I truly, truly love California. I don't love everything in California, but I definitely love this state. So, one-party system in California, ostensibly, in terms of the governor's mansion since, I would say, 2006. And we've had a super in our state now for several years. And I just want to ask you the question, and again, just be honest. You're just talking. Okay.
Right.
Have the Democrats with that much power, with a one-party system, lives here in California that is observable, and people can say, yeah, California, it is indeed the Golden State. What say you, Konstantine Anthony?
I'll give you two factors. One is objective. First, if you were watching the news last week, California has now in fourth place as the world's biggest economy.
I heard about that.
So it is a place that economic has a ton of agriculture as well. We feed millions upon millions of people. And so much of our media is created, and it can be argued that a lot of our society see reflected vision and on their phone screens, right? So that is a measurable. Another one is objective, subjective rather. There is in urban studies, it's called urban renewal and urban decay. Life cycle of major metropolitan areas, right? City around the world, anywhere that there's a lot of people congregated. Sometimes there's good things happen, sometimes there's bad things happen. It's cyclical. And the one outlier to those cycles is something called cultural meccas. And it's a phrase that's used in urban meccas, where a city or a metropolis or an area of living does not fall prey to any sort of populated and populous. Mm-hmm. And it's not all the time. It's usually for a short amount of time, say or London in the 1600s, right? San Francisco in the 70s, New York in the 80s. And California has become, for the last 10 or 15 years, it's become sort of a mecca where everybody wants to go. And when people talk about, hey, where do you want to go on vacation, or where do you want to move to after college, or where do you want to run away from home to go to, right? It's always, oh, let's go. Two competing ideas there that, yes, there is verifiable economic indicators, data points that, and then there's sort of a cultural thing, a feeling that people want. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. I'll be the first. We've failed on drug addiction therapy and mental health therapy. We've failed on affordable housing. We've failed on keeping and beneficial for working class folks. You can come and make it rich in California, but can you sustain a middle class family, get into college? That's actually kind of tough. So in that aspect, there are things that we could do better. And so people their politics and just look at what is needed and do the right thing.
Well, let me ask you this again. Your pay grade in the Burbank City Council, you're not a state assembly person, you're not a state senator, and you're not, you're not a senator from the state. But I able to figure this out here. So here we are in California. We're paying $4.75, depending on where you are in the state, for Arizona, and it's $2 less. I spoke to Assemblywoman Pilar Chavo. Great conversation with her, not here in studio, but just privately, and she said that it's the oil companies that are passing the buck, gouging us, the consumer. But in reality, some of those same oil companies also shipping oil to places, but yet they're not being gouged like we are. So what gives?
Well, I would say up to Northern California, if you go to Central Valley or towards the Oregon areas, and gas is much cheaper. It's dollars and dollars cheaper. And so you have to start to think about supply and demand. We have built an entire state that is almost exclusively drivable, right? You really, right?
Yeah.
And so these companies know that. And so they do two things. One, they price gouge in the major. And two, money to lobby state lawmakers and, in fact, local politicians from building mass transit, housing near urban centers, jobs near housing centers. They're all go into every single election cycle that the average person is not aware of. They don't really look up the flyer that comes in the mail. I mean, California is so spread out now, you can't knock doors anymore. Everyone pretty much does those. You get a big glossy piece of cardboard in your mailbox, and you think, oh, this person looks nice, I'll vote for them. But that's a one-way message. Question, like, okay, well, where is your donor base? And so I always encourage folks, when they're going down the ballot, who knows who these people are, or do just even a little bit of research to see who they're funding. I don't vote for any dollars, meaning money from businesses. If it's an individual, I think that's totally fine. But, up and down the ballot, and it's not just Democrats or Republicans, it's nonpartisan races. You will see big corporate dollars come, developers, big pharma, all of these folks will and push for their candidates. So I always ask people, hey, do you take corporate money if you're running?
I've got an observation that was an older lady in our congregation, who, by the way, is an old school Democrat, who had a hard time voting, and she's basically a Kennedy Democrat, if you get my drift. And so what she said: politicians in California are essentially making California to where you either or really poor and then be subsidized to live here. What is that a perspective that people should be having about healthy?
It's not a healthy perspective, but to a certain degree, it is true, because a lot of what we've done in this state, those put them to private companies. We used to have a robust. I'll give you just one example. We used to have a robust up and down the state. It was subsidized. You could get in, do your time, figure out how cocaine, whatever you were dealing with, and get off it. Little by little, private buying up these drug rehabs. And so now they lobby the state to make sure that only they can, and that they can charge an arm and a leg to your insurance or to the state. And in fact, most people, if you don't, hey, I think I'm having trouble with this Vicodin that I took for, I want to just go in and get some drug, an arm and a leg. It's like a private spa out in Malibu. That's the only one that'll take you, right? There's no like middle class help. And so that's just a lot of the programs have been farmed out to private corporations that are making a profit off of people. So that is a big problem, and I'm hoping we can turn that back.
Well, I hope so too. This of this segment, you're a self-identified autistic person, and west of the Mississippi, you're the first person to have won public office. Word on this. You have some stuff you want to mention about autism, and I want you to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time, right before I became mayor, and I mentioned it earlier, I got my official diagnosis. It was a really sort of a journey for me. Services Secretary RFK Jr. Has said a lot of things about autism, and he wants to do an investigation as to the causes. I just want to counter a lot of the statements he's saying about who autistics are, our families. He paints kind of a very bleak picture. If you have listeners who have, and you think there's going to be some sort of devastating effect to your family, I'll be the first to tell you, yes, it is not impossible. There are so many great services out there. There are so many great people that can help you through. First and foremost, if you have a young kid, talk to your school district, get an IEP, an individualized education set up. If you have a younger adult, talk to the independent resource living centers. They're all throughout the county. Independent resource living centers help all of that, and it's a really great way to just help people who are struggling with this, who are dealing. And at the end of the day, I'm very easy to get a hold of. Konstantine Anthony, it's spelled with a K. You tell me, you can always reach out. My Instagram work, I'm very easy to find. I'm happy to talk folks through this.
And we might be able to. We might even be able to see you at the Santa Creative.
Oh, I think I actually have it on my calendar. Yes.
I think I saw you or ran into you either a year ago or a couple years ago. But thank you for coming on today. I think it's proof positive that a Republican conservative and a progressive liberal can actually talk. And even though we've had our issues in the past politically, I think it's important for people to know that two individuals can have a conversation. Thank you so much for coming in today, and looking forward to another opportunity in the future.
I appreciate that, Jerry. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Konstantine Anthony. Remember, when we come back, we're going to have a special phone call from Alexander Haberbush, Lex Rex Institute, and he's going to take a few minutes to talk about a brief on birthright citizenship that he and John Eastman are presenting to the Supreme Court on behalf of President Trump when we come back here on Politics. All right, we're back here for our final segment of Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station. We just had former mayor and Konstantine Anthony, a Democrat, a leftist. And now we're going to swing back on that political spectrum to the other side. Bush representing Lex Rex Institute. He called me just before the show today. I did not know he was going to come. I'm sure glad that he called me because they did like to share with our listeners today in reference to a Supreme Court brief concerning birthright citizenship and legal immigration versus illegal immigration. So, Alexander, welcome back to the show.
That's right. Thank you, Jerry. And as I like to call it, so citizenship because we don't, the position that we take and the one that our founding fathers held to and the court ought to adopt is that mere is not sufficient to confer citizenship. So that's sort of the general thrust of our amicus brief. It's filed on behalf of Center for Constitutional Jurisprudence, and John Eastman and I both submitted that jointly. Bottom line is, that issued universal injunctions against President Trump's executive order, essentially revoking recognition, are way beyond the pale, not just because they exceed the court's jurisdiction. It's three courts, one out of Maryland, one out of Washington. Each of those courts independently said, we're striking this down across the whole nation. They can't do that. They can't make rulings that affect the whole nation in that. Each of those courts actually addressed the merits of whether or not birthright citizenship is required in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court has held the 14th Amendment does require automatic citizenship for all persons born on U.S. soil, including children of illegal aliens and temporary. That's simply not true. The court has never held such a thing, and the lower court's decisions rely not on law, but instead a misreading of judicial dicta. We take. You can find our brief if you go to the Supreme Court's docket on the birthright citizenship cases. It's the one, again, the Claremont Institute Center for Constitutional Justice. We thought that point needed to be clarified, especially the important historical point, really, that going back to our founding fathers, who of the subjecthood, people who were subject to the king, the idea of being subject to the king based purely on the soil. It's called jus soli, or right of soil. King had right over all of the different domains that he can command. That's explicitly rejected in the Declaration. Jews and of right ought to be free and independent states. So our position that we take, the position the founding fathers took, is that citizens more on the exclusive jurisdiction of the United States, that is loyalty to the United States, not mere birth on U.S. soil.
So before we ask the do you think or guess the Supreme Court is going to actually not only hear this brief, but actually rule on it in an effective manner, I wanted you to let our listeners a little bit about this notion of district judges putting these national injunctions on the president's plans and agenda. When has a district judge been able to have so much power in all 50 states?
Well, they don't, and that's exactly the problem, is that judges stand until they're overturned by a higher court. Whether or not they actually have the power to issue these injunctions, they've been doing so. And our legal system is partly by design, somewhat solve things. There are advantages to that. It allows slow and deliberate consideration of issues rather than rush to conclusions very quickly. But the left has really been exploiting that feature of our legal system. Patently erroneous lower courts that are in gross excess of the jurisdiction exercised by those courts have been allowed to stand far longer than they should.
Now, opinion, do you think the Supreme Court is going to rule on the right side of this? Do we have the conservative muster on the court to be able to make these decisions?
I think it's there. Whether or not the court, whether or not each of us has the courage to make the ruling that I believe is demanded by both the law and the history on this issue, remains for us. We don't know that yet, but I think there's a few. I won't name names just out of respect for all the justices, but I do think we have the votes on. Ultimately, it is going to turn on whether they have the courage to make that decision.
Well, let's say
at this stage.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was going to say at this stage, what's actually functions. Even if the court rules against the position that we want them to take, this issue is coming back to the court in a few months. This issue one way or another. My expectation is that likely they're going to rule on a narrow ground this time around, and it'll have to come back for consideration. citizenship question, but it is going to have to get considered one way or the other.
Well, I'm going to give you the last word on this. Again, we're talking to Haberbush with the Lex Rex, and we'll be praying that this brief comes through and actually gets rightly a right decision on this. What is your take of this Trump 2.0 administration compared to Trump 1.0?
I've been very pleasantly surprised. And as you know, Jerry, I was not a critic of Trump the first time around. I thought that he was doing a lot of things that had done. And I thought that he did, I think he did a very good job his first time around as president. But I think this time, I honestly, as you know, involved in the efforts to ensure the integrity of our 2020 election, which were ultimately unsuccessful. But I think that having 4 years in 2 terms in office, I think, has really been a benefit to him. He knows how our system of government works, particularly he knows how the state operates, and I think measures this time around are really having a lot more teeth than last time. Now, there are certain areas where, I would refine a little, but I think definitely tending in the right direction on basically all fronts.
Well, give me an example of a couple of those areas you wouldn't mind refining.
Not to give away too much, but we're writing a brief in one of the Doge cases that you can keep your eyes open for months. But on the spending clause that I think this administration ought to be taking, and we'll point out that direction in brief upcoming in the next couple months.
Give our listeners a little bit about the can help and support you.
So we are a 501c3 nonprofit, so we are tax deductible, and we're dedicated to upholding the Constitution. Public officials remain faithful to their oaths to uphold that Constitution as well. We are not any and we will fight public officials wherever we see the Constitution being disregarded.
Well, the last time we spoke, you were you've now at least
That's
a couple
right.
of years, if I'm not mistaken, and
about a year and a half.
And so any Alexander Haberbushes in the future?
In the future, not quite yet, but we're hoping. We view kids, going really well in my life.
Absolutely.
So, no complaints on that front.
Well, my best to your wife and to, of course, Attorney John Eastman whenever you get to see him out for all of these briefs that are coming out.
Okay, I appreciate that, Jerry. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, Alexander. You have a great day. Again, that Alexander Haberbushes, encourage you folks to look him up online and support a good pro bono organization that will help churches and ministries and individuals out there that just need help fighting the government. Sometimes the government invades our lives. Next Wednesday on your hometown station, we will have David Hernandez with the Hispanic Republican Club. We'll be talking to him a little bit about some of the California politics that's going on. About 7-9 about the Democrats kind of balking a little bit about the whole sex offender thing and trafficking thing, and we'll talk about that Friday at 10 a.m. right here on KHTS Hometown Station. Yours truly will be interviewing Republican Gubernatorial Hilton live here on KHTS, so encourage you to tune in this Friday at 10 a.m. Watch on your hometown station on Facebook. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll catch you this coming Friday live at 10 a.m., and then we'll see you next Wednesday here with David. Pastor Cook saying thank you so much.